Kia ora koutou katoa. Hi, my name is Sarai Bareman and I have the great privilege of being the Chief Women's Football Officer at FIFA. It's a real honour to be part of an event that I'm so passionate about, the IWG World Conference on Women in Sport. In 2018, when we gathered in Botswana, no one was to know the turbulent times that lay ahead. At that time, I had the pleasure to present alongside World Rugby and the International Cricket Council under the topic of Let Them Lead, Changing the Leadership Landscape of Sports. When I reflect back on those discussions, it's clear how important this topic would come to be. The landscape of women's sport has experienced unprecedented challenges, and it's forums such as this that allow us to be ready for the most unexpected challenges. It's the relationships we build in environments such as this that allow us to support one another through incredibly tough times. For today's Lightning Talk, I will speak on the challenges facing professionalism in women's sport. I will speak on this through a football lens, but there are many parallels across all women's sports. In the context of women's football, we are living in a watershed moment where the game is professionalising at a rapid pace. But with rapid professionalisation comes many, many challenges. What can we do as leaders to ensure that growth in the women's game is sustainable? As women's football commercialises, how can we protect what makes it so special? What does equality mean in women's sports, and how do we achieve it? How can we leverage women's sports events to empower young girls and women all over the world? These questions and many more are so important to the women's game globally as we prepare for the 9th edition of the FIFA Women's World Cup, which will arrive on the shores of Australia and New Zealand in 2023. Two vibrant, sports-loving countries that champion equality, community, and diversity. And to have the biggest women's sporting event in the world heading down under is something for all of us to look forward to, and I hope to see all of you there next July and August. As an organisation, FIFA is dedicated to accelerating the professionalisation of women's football, and the World Cup is our sport's biggest growth opportunity and a powerful tool to empower women. In 2019, 1.12 billion people from 205 countries tuned in to experience the magic of the Women's World Cup in France. This tournament is the biggest lever that we can pull as FIFA to continue the professionalisation of the women's game. For so many reasons, the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023 will be a tournament of firsts. The first to be co-hosted by two nations in the Southern Hemisphere, featuring 32 teams that will showcase women's football on the world stage. The eyes of the world will set their sights on the greatest edition yet, and this is a huge opportunity for us all as we continue this new exciting era of women's sports. Of course, the Women's World Cup is not the first international women's sporting event that the region has hosted. 2022 has seen an influx of international women's sporting events arrive on our shores. The ICC Women's Cricket World Cup and the Women's Rugby World Cup were hosted by New Zealand, and the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup was hosted by Sydney. These iconic events, including the IWG World Conference on Women's in Sport, to me are already huge indicators of the ongoing professionalisation of women's sports. To speak more specifically about the challenges facing professionalism in women's sports, I'm going to touch on 3 key points. Firstly, I will address what we mean when we talk about professionalism in women's football. Secondly, I will address some of the challenges we face to accelerate the professionalisation of women's sports. And then finally, I will share what FIFA is doing to try and overcome these challenges. So what do we mean when we talk about professionalism in women's football? When you hear the word professional, it's easy to focus on the haves and the have-nots and what we see in the men's game. It's easy to think about things like prize money on offer to the top teams in the world, but the challenge is actually much broader than that. The reality is there is no quick switch that we can flick to fully professionalise the women's game. What we want to see is more women earning a full-time living from the game, to make a career from the sport, to have more role models like Sam Kerr, Rebecca Stott, or Alex Morgan inspiring young girls all around the world to play at the highest level, and in fact, make a career out of becoming a footballer. For too long, female footballers, even those who have represented their countries, have been forced to balance full-time playing commitments with full-time work. And even worse, we've lost so many talented footballers from the game because of this reason. What can we do as leaders to inspire change and professionalise the game in a way that provides more opportunities for women to make a full-time living from football? Not just on the pitch, but also off the pitch. But as I said, there are no quick fixes to bridge the gaps between the haves and the have-nots. And let's not forget, in women's football, we have a gap of more than 50 years to close. For 50 years, it was illegal for girls and women to play the game. We're working hard to close that gap, and we won't be deterred by the challenges that stand in our way. It goes without saying that women's sports has experienced institutional neglect for far too long. In football, the first Men's World Cup was played in 1930. The first Women's World Cup was played in 1991. That is a staggering 61-year gap where the boys of the world could dream of becoming world champions, whilst the girls were not offered the same opportunity to dream. The situation historically is largely the same at club and league level as well. But with every edition of the FIFA Women's World Cup, we see growth, not just at national team level, but also with the clubs and the leagues. One of our biggest challenges has been access to facilities. Some of the biggest clubs in the world with the best facilities did not allow their women's teams the rights to access them. This situation is improving, but in many clubs, leagues, and national teams around the world, this institutional neglect still exists and proves to be one of our biggest challenges. These are just some of the challenges that drive me and my team every day when it comes to the professionalism of women's football. So coming back to the question, what are we as leaders going to do to overcome the challenges we face to professionalise women's sport? I certainly don't have all the answers, far from it, but since joining FIFA in 2016, this has been a big question that I've asked myself every day, and I want to share some insights to how we as FIFA are trying to tackle this big question. In 2018, FIFA made a bold statement. As an organisation, we launched the first ever global women's football strategy, which charts the course for how FIFA works with our confederations, our member associations, clubs, players, the media, fans, and other stakeholders to confront and surmount the challenges that we face. This strategy will guide us until 2026, and it lays the foundation for our core objective, to accelerate the growth of women's football globally. This strategy is FIFA taking a stance as an organisation to ensure that everyone within football contributes and takes ownership of the responsibility we have to grow the women's game. FIFA's women's football strategy has 5 pillars, which I will touch on before finishing. The 5 pillars are develop and grow, showcase the game, communicate and commercialise, educate and empower, and finally, govern and lead. Develop and Grow focuses on encouraging more girls and women to play the game. We have a very ambitious goal to have 60 million players by 2026, and we are working every day to achieve this through FIFA's women's development programs. Since launching our development programs in 2020, FIFA has worked on 244 different projects with 88 member associations from around the world. Our pillar Showcase the Game shines a light on FIFA's women's football competitions and how we can leverage the FIFA Women's World Cup to act as a trigger for growth. The FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023 is the biggest opportunity we have, not to just leave a legacy in Australia and New Zealand, but all over the world. For example, in England, after the success of the Lionesses in France, there was an increase of 850,000 new girls and women playing the game by the end of 2019. Communicate and commercialise is about getting more eyeballs on the women's game, driving it into the mainstream where it belongs and broadening the value of women's football. It's about attracting more commercial partners to support the professionalisation of the women's game. The FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023 is the first edition where the commercial rights are being sold on a standalone basis. Previously, the rights were packaged all up with the Men's World Cup. Since commencing this journey, we have already secured 2 sponsors dedicated specifically to the women's game, Invisa and Xero, with many more to follow. Govern and Lead strives for gender balance and looks at football's governance structures, making sure that we have female representation in key decision-making bodies. This pillar is earmarked by FIFA's objective that all of its 211 member associations will have at least one position on its executive committee dedicated to the interests of women and women's football. Finally, the 5th pillar, Educate and Empower, places the importance on building capacity and empowering those in the women's game, both on and off the pitch. Programs such as the Coach Mentorship, which aims to increase the number of female coaches in the game, as well as Women in Football Leadership, where we unite female football leaders from all over the world, offer opportunities for capacity building for women in football. So, to finish, I would like to say thank you for joining this incredible network. It's a privilege to share my thoughts on the challenges we face to professionalise women's football, and I can't wait to learn from the inspiring lineup of speakers at this conference. Yes, there are many challenges, but together we are stronger. Together we can inspire change through the power of women's sports. Thank you so much.